Hello, Octalysis Primers. Today we're going to talk about the next section in the 10,000 hours of play 10K HP, which is Know Your Attributes. So, you probably saw from the last section that the 10,000 hours of play series is a development from the older series called the real life RPG. In Octalysis Prime, and a lot of people really like it, and I figured I should take each section and expand on that, because before each step we only took 10 minutes, and this time we can develop like a full-blown knowledge base on how to actually derive these things, how to get to each step, and we've made some changes to that too. And so today what we're focused on is knowing your attributes. Before it was choosing your game or your mission or your industry. Today it's knowing your attributes and talents, figuring it out so you can put yourself in a very successful situation. Now, I'm going to mention again where in the previous real-life RPG, the knowing your attributes is actually step 3. Step 2 used to be select your role. In a game, you usually select your role and then you see your attributes, but based on a lot of feedback over the years and thinking about it, I agree and I concluded that figuring out your attributes is probably a good first step before doing that. So, of course, even me, I'm continuously improving my work and the different systems and methodologies, and so I believe this to be an improvement, and we'll see if there's more improvements down the road. And if you're continuously an OP member, you'll be able to see what improvements are. So anyway, so one of the most important things about knowing your attributes is coming up with something I call the OP talent triangle. And so I believe that everyone in this world has like one top strength, something they just do better than anyone else out there. And it may be discovered, may not be. It may be something they've tried before, it might not be. Maybe even it's like in this time period it's not very useful. So for instance, Warren Buffett, he's the most successful investor in the world. He's usually either number 1 or top 3 richest guys on the planet, depending on where Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos is at. But he says he was really lucky because his skills of looking at a bunch of numbers and making judgment calls is useful in this time period, right? If he was born 100 years ago or 500 years ago, when success was depending on like how fast you can run or how strong your muscles are, he said he'd be a loser in that society. But he was just born in a time period where his skills allowed him to become one of the most successful human beings on Earth. And so sometimes you have a strength, but the time period may or may not be suitable for you. But of course, our practice here is how do you harness whatever you have and make it as successful as possible. So everyone has their top strength, and I believe that you have like 4 or 5 great strengths that you're just better than most people who are trying. And then you have like a few like pretty strong strengths, decent strengths, and like your like kind of strengths. You're pretty good at them, but like against other people who are good at them, you're just like a very average person. And so your top strength, I call that your edge strength. Like it's your edge, it's your best thing possible. And if you can determine what that is, it's not easy at all. If you can determine what that is and you harness it, you can become very successful in what you do. And if you look at the top 5, I call that the ring. So these are your ring strengths. So of course, if you put yourself in situations where you are utilizing your ring strengths, then of course you also become very, very successful too. And it's not just your edge strength; it's a combination of a multitude of strengths added together. Now, does it have to be 4 or 5? Could it be 6? Could it be like 3? That's fine too. Again, my work is meant to be pragmatic. It's meant to be results oriented. Like we want to get things done. We want to improve our lives. I'm not gonna say, oh, you have only 3 ring strengths. You have to like figure out the last one before you finish this process, right? It's really just to help you figure out what your strengths are and how to make your life more successful. So yeah, I don't think you have to beat yourself on the exact numbers, but just keep in mind, figure out what your true top strengths are and what your great strengths are. And then, then the rest of the things you're good at, I call that the base talents. It's good to understand them and, of course, harness them as much as possible. Now, most people have a hard time figuring out what their strengths are, right? What their top strengths and great strengths and all these things. And it does take time. There's no like surefire way, but I'm going to show how I came up with my Opie talent triangle. And then I'm going to show an example of June Loiza's, one of my coworkers and partners. And yeah, and then we're going to give you some examples of how they work together. So at the beginning, I didn't know what was my greatest strength, but what I did is I had a small understanding of what I'm decently good at compared to other people. So I just threw everything onto a sheet like this, right? It's all over the place. It's not in particular order. And then I started rearranging it. I started thinking that, hey, maybe some things are I'm stronger at, and some things are not. So I moved some things to the top, and some things to the middle, some things to the bottom. And so what I ended up deciding that, hey, associative thinking is my edge strength, and empathy, learn, use, conversion, optimism, visual models creation would be more of my ring strengths. And so I'll go through a little bit of detail explaining what they are. Just not so you can know me better, but just so you see some examples. So maybe that'll help you figure out your own strengths and looking back in your past. So my number one strength, I believe, is something called associative thinking, which means my brain makes connections between things that most people consider really, really random. And this is the basis of creativity, right? We mentioned many times that creativity almost is never coming up with brand new things that we've never encountered before. It's always a mix of the things that we have seen before, we have thought about before. So like a Pegasus is like a horse with wings. We've seen wings, we've seen horse. A unicorn is a horse with horns. Aliens, right? Aliens, even though they're from a different planet, they have probably different physics or chemical structures. We still imagine that they have like mouths and teeth to bite people. They have limbs, but it could be like totally like different, right? And so like they have to see. So associative thinking empowers creativity, but I didn't choose creativity as my edge strength because I went a little bit deeper about why I was creative. And associative thinking also means that I would be good at coming up with analogies, right? Making different like analogies of, hey, this is kind of like that. Oh, here's how I would explain this. And it helps me a lot because I explain many things that are kind of abstract or new to people. So by being able to come up with a lot of different analogies, I think this associative thinking has helped me a lot in that field. It also helps me or a person come up with like interesting names. So I used to be very good at coming up with funny names, but it feels connected to the concept. So like even some game design techniques, right? They're interesting names, and some of them are kind of cool and curious. So associative thinking is my top strength that allows me to do a lot of these things. Then we have, but I want to say that a lot of these strengths, if it's in the wrong environment, aren't necessarily strengths. They're actually weaknesses, or you're penalized for these strengths. So one example is when I was in college. Like for instance, the professor would give us a assignment to read 2 books and then write a comparison analysis, blah blah blah, on those books, right? And sometimes I would work super hard. I read both books, maybe even twice. I do a lot of outside research, and I come up with a great like thesis to connect them all together, and I write a paper that I'm super proud of, and then I turn it in, and then I get really low grades back, and the professor just says, hey, this has nothing to do with the course material, so clearly you don't understand the content. And I'm like, what are you talking about? How, if I don't understand the content, how can I come up with this? It's like so amazing, so brilliant. And you might say, hey, Yukai, maybe you're just delusional, right? You think you're like super genius making this stuff, but maybe it just sucks, and you just don't understand stuff. But I remember in other times, and in fact most other times, unfortunately, when I just didn't really care as much, and I probably didn't even read either of those books. I didn't do any research. I was less confident, and I just remembered, oh, I think the professor said these things in class, and I just type up a paper, I turn it in, I'll get a high grade. So that was very frustrating to me, right? Because it felt like I shouldn't exert myself in school. They just want me to regurgitate what I heard, and using my associative thinking ability was not useful. So I always thought that wasn't a strength. That was just me being weird and thinking like awkwardly, and I can't connect with people, and and stuff like that, or how they, I'm not in their thinking frequency. But of course, later on, this became a really useful strength, right? Associative thinking, I was able to connect games, something that's purely for fun, with productivity and business, right? Something that's serious, and pioneered gamification. You're one step closer to greatness. Now check out part 2 to complete your transformation.